You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
So welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is April 13th, 2023 at 7:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And what I thought I was going to talk about this evening, since we talked about loss last time, was separation. John Bowlby wrote these 3 volumes, and I thought that they were a great read, but it does end up being about 900 pages or so of material. And that was in paperback. Attachment, separation, and loss. Loss is really death. But if we think about it through the Buddhist lens of impermanence, everything arises and passes, including this body that we're in, and it ages and gets sick. And then, like all things, arises and passes. Separation is another thing. He described in the first volume around attachment this instinct that we have to seek proximity, physical proximity to people that we believe will protect us. It's our survival mechanism. And we start very early. I was talking to a friend of mine who's currently studying child development as part of a analytic degree. And he was talking about how infants will crawl toward the breast, and that the smell of the milk orients their direction of crawling. And they showed videotapes of an unassisted newborn dragging themselves toward the breast on the belly of a woman, and it took like 7 minutes. They just, as the nature of research wanted to see how long it would take, but they could have simply just picked the kid up and helped them latch, right? The drive really for attachment is so intense and so early. But then we can't stay in constant proximity, and so then we have to be able to separate. I'm not remembering the name of the person, but Bowlby called it a secure base which we're comfortable will be reliably available to us when we return from the separation. And maybe the name will come later, but he said he didn't see many secure bases in his work with people. Mainly what people get is a base, which may or may not be there when they get back, which leads to a sense of insecurity rather than security. I guess that he was thinking that if you do a survey of the general population, 28% of people are secure, and that leads 72% of people who are insecure and disorganized. So if you focus on the resourced group, then 65% of people are secure. It's a big difference between the two. So one of the things about the further unequal distribution of resources in our society will put an increasing pressure on insecurity and childhood, which will grow into the complex problems of adults that don't function very well, can't operate as autonomous beings in our society, even in our subcultures. They'll have trouble. In my neighborhood, it's quite transformed. We have the NIMBY thing, not in my neighborhood thing. And they built a big uh, village of small homes for temporary housing for the homeless. It's completely transformed the neighborhood because of the advent of what I'm derisively calling meth zombies, uh, which is it's a heartbreaking experience. But at the same time, it's very otherworldly to have these almost silhouettes of people drifting and disconnected, really, from a kind of discourse that might be possible, and the way that our culture really doesn't address any of this in a meaningful way. We're going to have to blame Clinton for this, President Clinton, who uh, took uh, the uh, strategies, the poverty relief strategies that we had, that actually funneled money directly to people and families that needed assistance, and instead divided it into block grants that were just given to the states for distribution in the way that the states felt was useful. And actually what ended up happening is they just usurped the money for other purposes for the most part. And even though we've increased the amount of money that we spend on eliminating poverty, uh, really maybe 20 or 22% of the money is still engaged in poverty relief programs, and all of the rest of the money has been taken for other purposes. So we're actually increasing the expenditure of trying to eliminate poverty, and it's getting worse and worse because we're not really attending to it. From the Buddhist side of these, the Buddhist perspective of this, everything is impermanent. These connections to people are permanent, and they come and go. This is both at the micro level and the macro level. Even if you have a stable, ongoing relationship with somebody that's very regulating and very supportive and helpful, in order for you to participate in your solo exploration, where you go and find out the things that you need to know, you need to be able to separate from them, go out, find out what you need to know, come back and re-engage. And it's that process of coming and going from your whole self and the whole self of somebody else, and that exquisite sharing of what it is that you find out, that really is interesting and engaging to somebody who's close to you, and then your engagement in their sharing what they're able to find out, and what really is essential to the meaningfulness, the richness of the life that they're living. So this coming and going is an essential piece of the secure functioning. You're confident that the person will be there when you get back. And actually, when you find out the thing that you need to know, you can't wait. And you rush back to be able to tell them this thing that you found out. And they're interested in you. They're interested in the things that you're finding out. And they know the importance it has to you. And they make themselves this wonderful sounding board that you can use to really illustrate and deepen the understanding of the things that you find out. And because you're in a collaborative relationship that's mutual, you do that for them, and that becomes the central energy of secure functioning relationships. Now, where does that come from? When you're born, when you're an infant, of course, you can't move really. We talk about that arduous climb over the belly to the breast that takes a newborn infant everything it has in 7 minutes to make it the half a foot. You can't sit up, you can't roll over, you can't navigate anything. And so if somebody doesn't come and take care of you, you don't develop beyond that part. But if somebody does come and they're reliably there, then you feel a sense of safety in the connection to them, a sense of being well attached. And then as you get older and you're able to crawl around or uh, walk around on two legs, you're testing this process of being able to leave and come back, leave and come back. Happens at a lot of different levels. I remember with one of my, I like to call them Buddha kids. It's like a God kid, Guthrie. When he was learning about attunement, he would kneel on my knees and he would get like 6 inches from my face and he would stare into my eyes. And then as the attunement became emotionally too intense, he would laugh, arch his back, turn his head up and look up to the left, which is this instinctual thing that we all do when we break attunement. And then he would regulate and then he would come back and he would do this 20 times or 30 times or 40 times, learning to engage at a close distance, really attuned to somebody, feel the emotional experience of that, and then break it off when it was too much, regulate and come back in. Did you have somebody who did that for you so that you could learn the comfort of intimate attunement and disconnection and reattunement, that coming and going, that separation? And then when you were old enough to crawl and begin this process of separating, the process of autonomy, that early autonomy that happens when the child recognizes that they're different from the caregivers, and they have their own agenda and that they need to find out the things that they need to know. You'll notice if you're around kids that are just at that stage, they'll crawl a little bit away from the caregiver and then look around, and they're looking for the reassurance of the caregiver to continue going. And if the reassurance is there, they can crawl a little bit further. And if it isn't there, they scoot right back to physical proximity with the caregiver. That reliability is essential. That sense of security is essential to foster the development of your capacity to explore something. They'll get to the doorway, checking back. They'll get outside of the door, outside of the view, the reassuring gaze of the caregiver, and come scooting back. And if they go for longer and longer periods of time, when they scoot back, you need to be in the place where they can find you so that they have a sense of safety in going and exploring something. And if they have that, they'll get all over the house. They'll get all over the backyard. They'll go up and down the block with a sense of safety. And if they don't have that, different things can happen. People who grow up to be dismissing grow up in households that it's so consistently not there. The child gives up on coming back, gives up on looking for reassurance and support from somebody else. They shut that all down. Doesn't mean that they stop exploring. It just means they don't come back. They don't learn about sharing the experiences of what's fulfilling and meaningful. They often learn instead to keep it a secret because the thing that they've been asked to do, tasked to do, which is this idealization of the caregiver, isn't often coinciding with what's really meaningful to them. So they learn, instead of a delight in this and in authenticity, they learn to express what they need to express in order to get what they want. It's not exactly lying in that system. They recognize what they need to present to get the thing that they want, and because that's their childhood conditioning, they've always had to do that. They do that because that's what they think the business of getting the thing that you want is. It doesn't occur to them that they're not telling the truth. because they're telling you what you need to hear in order for you to give them what they want. They don't think, oh, I'm going to lie to this person to get what they want. They think, this is what I need to say in order to get it. Following me on that distinction. Preoccupied people, because sometimes the caregiver is there and sometimes they're not there, they never develop the confidence to really separate from the caregiver. So they're always in proximity to the caregiver. And because of that, it truncates their skill set in exploring. They don't really learn how to explore because they've never felt safe enough to try to explore. So all of that early period of trial and error that children can engage in quite freely, they don't do at all because it's too frightening to be away from the actual physical proximity of the caregiver. So that separation piece is harder. If you talk about it from the emotional regulation frame, dismissing people don't seek regulation with other people because they didn't get it when they were children. The cause typically of dismissing attachment in adults is a profound neglect of their needs as children. And this starts right away. There isn't that person who picks them up, that person who attunes to them sensitively, that person that learns how they're communicating, learns how to regulate them, mirrors back to them that this is how you do it. They don't have that. So they don't learn it. It's not that we often assign a volitional aspect to this where they know how to do it, but they choose not to do it. Not only do they not know how to do it, they don't even know it's a thing that people do because they've never had that training. You can't blame them for not doing something that they don't even know really is something that people do. Christian.
So would they not be able to recognize two people emotionally regulating each other as such, or like what how would they interpret that?
I don't think they do notice it much, but the other thing is that they self-select out of the groups of people that do that. So it isn't something that they ordinarily notice. Collaborative emotional care, collaborative emotional co-regulation is a requirement for people who do that, and they don't do it. And so as soon as somebody who seeks connection to them where they would expect all of the features of a secure functioning relationship, and they don't get any of that, they don't engage in the relationship too much. Dismissing people and secure people don't really connect that often because the deficits in the dismissing person are so great that the secure person isn't interested in them. They don't see them as capable of really functioning in a relationship in the way that they understand them. They seem quite rigid, quite shut down, quite limited. Preoccupied people do learn that there is such a thing as co-regulation, but they learn to depend on other people to do it for them. And because the caregiver is so unreliable, they don't get to the next step, which is where they interject the skill set and can do it for themselves. So they remain dependent on somebody else to do it for them. So their exploration is limited, but also their emotional capacity to separate and be able to explore is limited. So that's one of the barriers for them to go and explore. They can't tolerate the separation because they can't regulate their emotions well enough to be separate from the attachment figure. Is that making sense? We're talking about separation skills here, really. Secure people learn to collaborate with each other in terms of taking care of each other. Insecure and disorganized people don't learn to do that. And I do think it's important to understand it's not that they know how to do it and decide that they're not going to do it. They don't know how to do it. And in fact, most of the time, they don't even know it's a thing that you do. So that if you're looking for that in a relationship, if you're a secure person looking for that, and you encounter insecure, disorganized person, they don't know that. They don't know what to do. They don't know. They really would have a hard time understanding what you're talking about. You find that sometimes in conversations. I was working with a couple once, and she said to him that I've asked you to take care of me in these very specific ways because we were working on you understanding what you need to do so that I feel taken care of. This is a training and learning collaboration. And he said, but I did take care of you. And she said, no, you didn't. And then he said, well, I did this for you. 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 And I did that for you. You should feel really well taken care of. She said, but none of those things were things that I asked you to do. And he said, well, the things that you asked me to do weren't important. These were the important things that you should feel taken care by. Do you hear what the problem might be? And that we need to be taken care of in a way that's meaningful to us, not in the way that's meaningful to someone else. If somebody takes care of us in the way that they like to be taken care of, when it doesn't matter to you, it will not matter that they did that. And if they don't do the things that mean something to you, you will feel not taken care of. Christian?
So I guess I'm trying to work out how a preoccupied person would get emotionally regulated, because I would think, like, if they're with a avoidant person, then the avoidant person isn't really gonna engage like fully or authentically. Maybe the avoidant person would kind of be seductive. So are they just completely dysregulated most of the time, or what regulates them actually kind of an inauthentic relationship, whereas a secure person would seem to be able to engage authentically?
So what happens with a preoccupied person is that their emotional system is often unregulated, but they tune in, they become preoccupied with the mind state of the other person, and they regulate the mind state of the other person. And because they're identifying with the empathetic experience, not their own experience, when they're in proximity to somebody whose empathetic experience they've made their primary emotional experience, and they regulate that person, they feel regulated. When they separate from that person and they lose the empathetic connection to them, they feel disconnected, and then they're in this place of touching into their own emotional experience, which is quite dysregulated. So the urgency for proximity to them is because they can regulate the other person, they identify with the mind state of the other person, and they feel regulated, and their own emotional experience drifts into the background. Did I mention anywhere that was a good system? I don't think I did.
It works,
Disorganized people, of course, don't seek that proximity. They're frightened of it, and so they tend to be constantly dysregulated and hidden because of that, because of the fearfulness around it. In order to explore well, you have to be able to separate from your person or persons, and you have to be able to come back to them and find them reliably. When we talk about Dunbar numbers in organizing relationships, and I like to use his frame because secure people know pretty well how to organize relationships, but insecure and disorganized people don't know so well how to do it. You have your above the line, people you tell everything to, below the line, people you tell some things to. You have your A and B relationships, A relationships you take care of. You take care of them on a daily or every other day basis. B relationships weekly or every other week. see relationships monthly or quarterly is good enough. In the new research, Dunbar talks about close Cs and the whole group. So 30 to 40 people in the C group, and then 15 close Cs, which you actually interact with quite a bit. That close group of friends. And then D relationships, people you see yearly or so. Insecure and disorganized people tend to keep their families in the D group because it's so painful to be in relationship to them, but not always the case. And then how many of those relationships do you need? And really what we're focusing on here is how many people do you need so that when you need connection and you need regulation, do you always have somebody available to do that with you? Is that one or two or three or four? The problem with only one person who is regulating you and in an agreement to do that is, how do you separate from each other so that each of you can go explore? Let's say you want to go on a 2-week meditation retreat and your partner is going to stay back in householder life. How do you reasonably expect them to spend 2 weeks with no regulation if you're gone, if there aren't any other relationships that are close enough to provide that functioning? So that's where the B relationships come in. How many of those do you need? Do you like to have an A relationship? Do you like to have one person that you put the majority of your relational energy into? Or do you prefer to spread it out? Are you very monogamous, so you only have a sexual component with one relationship? Or are you more on the poly side where you have multiple intimate relationships with a sexual component into them? How are you going to organize this so really you're free to explore and find out what you need to know? Because that's where the richness of life comes from. It doesn't come from the relationships. The relationships are like a safety net that support you so that you can take the risks of exploring the stuff that you really need to know. And you need support to do that, encouragement to that, because to get really out there at the edge of these things where you find out the things that you need to know is risky. How do you support reasonable risk taking so that you can discover these things? That's what we're talking about. How do you regulate your emotions well enough that you can separate from the people that support you long enough you can figure out what you need to do? And then when you get so dysregulated, you can no longer regulate yourself. Can you then come rushing back to these people who will catch you and help you re-regulate and support you and listen and enjoy, and then push you out the door so that you can go do it again? That's what I like to talk about in terms of this capacity to separate. If you get really good at regulating your emotions, a master at regulating your emotions, you still want to be able to take a risk that's big enough that it would knock you off balance. And that's when the safety net is there to catch you so that you can feel safe to take those risks. Because what happens when you don't is that you begin to limit the risk taking. And as you limit the risk taking, and I'm not talking about jumping off a mountain in a kite suit. I would never do that. But I might read some daring literature. How do you separate long enough to be able to do that so that you can come back and forth? And then can you set it up so that you actually are willing to do that for the people that support you? That's the idea of separation. John Bowlby, of course, was tasked by the British government to evaluate whether the children that were separated during the Blitz, Germany bombed the civilian sections of London in an attempt to undermine the morale of the population. And so the government, in response, ordered the children out of London. And middle class and upper class people, of course, sent the children to their second homes and to their relatives in the countryside, but the poor children were taken and put into foster care in the countryside. Government wanted to know whether or not those separations caused harm to the children that the government was then going to have to provide resources for. And Bowlby's investigation of that discovered that the separations, particularly in children under 3, could be catastrophic and, in fact, cause harm that would last a lifetime in the children. Have you seen the 7-Up series that was done? It was both enlightening and, in some ways, horrifying. You look at the kids at 7, and then you follow them each year, and you see, in some sense, the limitations of the family systems and the resources that the family systems can bring to what is the potential outcome for the children. And there was very little movement beyond what the origin stories were like. I think that in our culture, we're in the U.S. This is as hard a story, really. We don't provide resources for children in a way that they can develop beyond really the resources of their family systems. We don't have a public education system, for instance, that moves people beyond their origins. And in fact, as we can keep pulling resources out of these public school systems, out of these systems that support children, and the inequality in our culture gets greater and greater, the kids at the upper end that are resourced and have private money really thrive and can do very well. And even the kids that are as bright and as talented, are stymied from the very beginning of their lives, and they never develop in the same way. I think this is one of the great existential crises of our time, which is the truncation of the talent and of people because of the poverty, because of the restrictions of resources. And it is such a squandering of the resources that we have. So I find it quite heartbreaking to watch. And then the problems of this particular time, and how really we prefer to allow them to allow people to end up on the street with nothing, and go about our day if we can. So now what I want you to do is just think to yourself about your capacity to separate. Are you somebody who has a social network around you that you're quite engaged in, that you check in with regularly? Do they know what's going on with you? Do they know what your interests are and what you're exploring? Do they support and encourage you? Do they check in to make sure that you're actually supported well enough that you can do it? And have you been able to put that in place and maintain it well? Or is something else happening? And we look at this. In order to explore deeply, you have to be able to separate and go explore. In order to separate, to go explore, you have to be able to regulate your emotions. So then we can again turn back to meditation practice and look for meditation strategies that we can use to bolster or develop these skills at emotional regulation. So first, what we need is a real ability to recognize the emotional states that we're in. You need an ability to recognize how the mind reacts to these emotional states. Dan Siegel uses the term the window of tolerance, which describes the intensity of emotional experience that you can be with without having to do anything. And then if there's a reaction to the present moment which exceeds the window of tolerance, then you have to regulate that event. And this is really what we're talking about, your capacity to regulate intense emotional experience. And how do you do it? And we've all learned how to do it in our family systems, and we have our tool bag of strategies that we use. And here we need to begin to investigate those so that we can begin to restrict the use of afflictive strategies and foster the development of beneficial strategies. If you have to consume your energy regulating your emotional experience, there's nothing left to carry the exploration. You have to get good at this so that you can bob and weave. What did Muhammad Ali say? Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. You have to get good at this. A lot of us grow up in challenging environments, so we've somaticized emotion. This also takes a ton of energy, just a shocking amount of energy to hold emotion in the body, waiting for later processing. So you have to get good at processing. Got to catch up with the old stuff and then keep the new stuff at bay by really being able to process it as it happens. And then you need to be sensitively attuned to other people's emotional experience. So the empathetic experience you need to really pay attention to and develop so that you can interact with people in a way that's sensitive to them. Did you have a sensitive enough caregiver who really attuned to you and really understood what was going on and taught you to do that sensitive attunement, that reading of the empathetic experience of the other person and the ability to respond in a way that they feel taken care of? Do you know what that feels like for yourself? That somebody attunes to you, they pick up on what's happening, and then they respond to you in a way that has meaning to you. You need to get good at that. Then you're actually free to separate and go explore, and then you can come back and share it. Or when somebody's separated from you to go explore, they come back, you can read them, you can understand what the experience was that they had, what it means to them, and so that you can sensitively respond to what's happening. Have you ever misattuned to somebody to catastrophic effect? All right. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to attach, really connect, when we want to be able to separate, and we want to get good at losing things, because everything is impermanent. Nothing really lasts. We want to be free then to engage while it's here, really go all in, so we can have the experience of it. This is part of the exploration thing. And understand in that process of going all the way in that it's going to be lost. So we don't cling to it. We don't suffer from the losing of it. We engage as fully as we can so we can have as rich an experience as possible. And at the same time, when it's ready to end, it ends. Then there's the process of grieving the loss of it, then the moving into the next thing that's happening. Making sense? So why don't we do a little concentration practice, then we'll do some noting feeling states technique so we can figure that out. So go ahead and take your meditation posture, ringing the bell. Any comments or questions about the meditation? The one last thing I wanted to say about the separation piece is when you're learning to do this, sometimes it's a good idea to take a wing person with you. You know what I mean? Somebody who's going to go along with you so that you can be regulated as you're going, so that you can begin to extend the periods of time of exploring. Usually, you can find people in that B group or close C group that's willing to go along, and then have those little hits of emotional regulation along the way so that you can carry yourself further out. It doesn't always have to be somebody that you know. For instance, a lot of people who are working on writing or something like that will sit in a cafe or in the library because there's something regulating about a group of people together that helps support them as they're attempting to explore. Whereas if they stayed at home and were alone, they would be too easily dysregulated to continue with the work. So it isn't this end goal that you have to start with. You can start and develop it in collaboration with the people around you, and sometimes that means dragging one of them along. So you get 2 tickets to go and do something rather than just one and invite them to come. That gets you to go, and it gets you regulated in the process of it. Thank you for coming. We have a meditation and addiction series of half days starting in May. It's on the calendar if you're interested in that stuff. We have a level 1 starting. We're going to have another level 2 starting. We have a retreat in Utrecht the second week of June. If you happen to feel like a trip to Europe makes sense at this moment in your life. When does a trip to Europe not make sense? We're going to do our first level 2 in the morning rather than in the afternoon. So if that's a better fit for your schedule, that's coming up in July. What else is happening? Anyway, that's what I can think of at the moment. Most of that is up on the website. Take a look at it. If you're interested in a level 2, we actually just started one, and the second class is next, I think, Thursday or next Tuesday. Let me look. We leave the classes open until the second class, and then we close them. So if you wanted to jump into a level 2, you could do that. So next Tuesday is the class. I offer these classes for on a basis. You had your hand up, Christian. Did you have a question?
Yeah, not to leave on a big question. I was curious about, like, when you run into avoidant people that want to use like non-social emotional regulation strategies. Like, we just learned a solitary emotional regulation strategy. So like if someone wanted to just do that and didn't want the relational part, do they crash at some point in just learning these meditation strategies? Or like, what could you get so good? I mean, I don't think you could get so good that you wouldn't need other people, right?
So the thing about dismissing people is the auto regulation strategies that they use work as long as they can suppress their emotions. Once you teach them to do the noting feeling states technique and they do enough of it that it breaks the filter, and then they then have conscious experience of their emotions, then the auto-regulation strategies don't work as well. And they're more inclined then to move into a more collaborative way of relating. The thing about dismissing people is they already explore. They already know how to investigate whether something's going to be better for them than something else. And these strategies are all much better for them than the afflictive auto-regulating strategies. and they can figure that out really quick, and they can see the benefit it has for them. And so they're inclined to shift into the strategies that work better because they can recognize it. It's still self-centered in that orientation of this works better for me, it's more economical, and I can do more with it. They're not thinking, oh, I can empathetically connect to somebody for the first time and how awesome that will be. They're thinking, I can actually maneuver better with this approach than the other approach.
But you don't think that you could ever train the meditation strategy so well that it actually, your brain decides it's the lower calorie strategy than co-regulating with someone?
I don't think that you can take the risks of exploration and not knock yourself off balance to the point where you can't bring yourself back. So that then what you would be facing is, yeah, you get really good at the auto-regulating strategy, but you still have to limit your exploration, so it's still less interesting, it's still less fulfilling. And dismissing people really get that. They get that it's a limit that they don't want.
Okay.
So I offer the teaching on a dana basis. Dana is the Pali word for generosity. But I do hope if you have resources that you'll make a donation to support us. It helps support me and also the work that Mettagroup is doing. There's a link on the website to do that. Any amount is appreciated. And of course, if you don't have resources, you're totally welcome to be here and practice with us. Really appreciate your practice and hope to see you soon on the path. Bye.
Thank you, George.
Glad to have you. Come back.